Hi, my name is Chris, and in this video, I'm going to be covering the basics of NetSuite. And before we dive into this, I do want to point out on this channel, we've got over 40 videos that all cover some specific aspect of NetSuite. So those are all available. And if you want to check out the Basics of NetSuite course, an entire course on the basics laid out, if you click on the link below, you can get access to that. The course is completely free. And keep in mind, if you are, for example, an administrator in training, we do have additional courses for administrators on accounting, for consultants. Those are paid courses. And again, you can check them out in the link below. So first off, NetSuite. To understand NetSuite, you got to get a concept of what is NetSuite. So NetSuite is a type of ERP. And really, when you look at NetSuite, at its core, when you strip away all of the kind of marketing copy about NetSuite, its main functionality is accounting. That's what it does best. So it does have other features like CRM, inventory management, etc. But at its core, accounting is what NetSuite is meant to do. It's what it does best. And it's the frame of reference in which you should look at NetSuite, all other things attaching to that core functionality. Another thing that's important to understand about NetSuite is that it is a relational database. So in this large database where you have all of these different records, because it's relational, these records tie to and relate to each other. So for example, if you have a customer in your NetSuite account, that customer, let's say they've bought 10 different things from your organization. So that might be 10 different sales orders over a period of time. All of those sales orders are individual records and they all tie back to that customer record. That is a key aspect of NetSuite, as well as the fact that it is cloud-based, which means that you're not storing all these records in this database at your site or at your company, but it's being stored in the cloud, and you and any other users for your company are accessing that database from NetSuite. So in this rather long video, I'm going to be really ripping through a lot of the basics of NetSuite. If there's any one specific thing that you'd like more information about, again, you can find a video covering that in our channel. But without further ado, let's get into this. All right, so first off, let's just log into NetSuite. So let's type in NetSuite, and notice this first thing is just a promotion, but if you scroll down, you get the actual website here. So we can go straight to login, and it pulls up our login information. So I'm just gonna put in my information here, and I'm gonna put in my password. So if this is the first time you're logging into NetSuite, there's really two ways that you can log in. One, your administrator can give you a temporary password. So the first time you log in with that temporary password, and the first thing it's gonna have you do is basically set what your permanent password is gonna be. The second way is your administrator will actually send you an email, and in that email, you'll click on a link that will take you immediately to a page to set your password. Once you set that password, you simply log in with that password. Both routes, in the end, will ask you to set security questions. That's pretty standard, just like with many other websites, you set those security questions. I recommend you do it first thing, you don't put it off until later, and then it'll bring you to this page. So what we're looking at here is called your home dashboard. And this is not necessarily the home dashboard that other people are gonna see, because you, as a NetSuite user, are going to be in a specific role. So depending on what your role is in the company, you might be an executive in the company, you might be a sales representative or an accountant. In this case, if you look in the top right over here, we are in a role, the name, it'll show your employee name there. So we're in the role with Ann Trainer. You'll see that long list of kind of jargon, SSWD. That's really where your company name will go. And then after the company name, you'll see at the end there, we're an accounts payable analyst. So we're basically in an accountant role. And so what we're gonna see on our home dashboard is gonna be related to that role that we're accessing from. If you're coming in as an administrator, and at some point I'll switch to administrator role just to show you what that looks like, you'll notice that it's very different. So these dashboards are tailored to whatever role you're accessing from. And as well as the role that you're in will adjudicate the kinds of permissions that you have and restrictions that you have in NetSuite and what you're able to influence. So just to give you an orientation, because I know there's a lot that we're looking at here. So the first thing we're going to take a look at in this home dashboard is, you see that thick blue bar there. We're going to take a look at everything underneath that first. So you see all of these little windows, right? We've got this window here. We have this window here. You can drag them. You can move them into other locations. So it's pretty drag and drop capable. And all of these little windows are referred to in NetSuite as portlets. So it's almost like portal and lit, meaning like almost like a little portal. And really they give you access into other records or information in NetSuite. So they're really just handy tools to be able to use certain NetSuite functionality. So if we just walk through these really quickly, we have a key performance indicator meter up here. We have a shortcut portlet over here. We've got these tiles. And again, notice that they all relate to the fact that I'm in an accounts payable analyst role. So they're all related to accounts payable, right? So we have accounts payable register, open bills, vendor list. These things all are related in that way. I can also customize this dashboard. If I go to personalize and open that up, I can add new dashboards. I can take certain ones off. I can, as you saw, I can drag and drop them in any location that I want. And then this is a key one. The reminders portlet gives us the ability to, and again, for the accounts payable, these are coming up with a bunch of reminders that are related to the accounts payable analyst. So you see bills to pay, etc. And again, you can customize that. You can take certain reminders off. You can add certain reminders. And sometimes it's just information for you. And sometimes you might be an approval terminal, an approval person for different things going through, like maybe sales orders. You have to approve sales orders as the sales manager to be able to move on to the next step. So you'd come on, if you see that there's 3 sales orders that have to be approved, you can immediately click on them and approve those and pass them on. So the reminders portlet is a very, very important one to take a look at. Next up, we're going to take a look at this dark blue bar that I pointed out earlier. So this thing is referred to as a center. No matter what role you're in, that bar, which will always be there, is referred to as the center. And in this particular one, we're looking at an accounting center. And for an administrator, that one's called the classic center, which is important. And basically the concept is, as you'll see here, it's basically a bunch of tabs. The tabs are going to be related based on the role that you're logging in with. The tabs are going to be related to your post or your job, and they're going to be optimized best for what you need. So we see vendors. If we hover over that, we get a bunch of drop downs. Notice all of these have their own little drop down windows. And they basically, I also often refer to this as the navigation bar, because it's what you use to navigate within NetSuite. If you want to go into certain records or certain lists, actions in NetSuite, that center or navigation bar is your way to access those things in NetSuite. So that's a very important one. It's a little overwhelming at first because there's so many tabs. Some of the simpler roles have less tabs, but it's still going to be a lot. And each one of them has so many things underneath it. There's certain ones that you're going to use a lot. And as you start really dealing with NetSuite, they'll get more familiar and you'll start understanding, okay, customers, great. These are certain things I always use for customers, and you'll start locating them quite easily. Next, I already commented on the roles up in the top right there, but so obviously we're in the accounts payable role, but I do want to make a mention of the fact that if you need to change role, you might have multiple roles, or for example, even if you're the accounts payable analyst, you might also have an employee center role, which allows you to do more internal things like log what your hours were for that week, or if you want to take time off or holidays, you often will log it in that employee center. So if you want to switch between, let's say, your accounts payable analyst role and the employee center, or you might have a sales manager and a sales representative role, if you want to do those role switching, the way to access that is by clicking on this area here or hovering over it, and a drop-down window will show you all the roles that you have accessible, and you can simply pick whatever's relevant for you. So before moving on, I'm actually going to switch to my administrator role because it has more permissions. So now that I'm in the administrator role, notice that the dashboard changed quite dramatically. So all the portlets changed to things that are more relevant to an administrator. And also you'll notice the center changed. Certain ones are still there, but others disappeared, like the customer tab, and other tabs such as customization are now there that weren't in the previous center. So you kind of get a concept of how the roles can be different from one to the next. Next up, we're going to take a look at this new record button. So this little button up here, notice we get this drop down. This allows you to create a new record very quickly. So it's really just a shortcut to create a new type of record. And you can personalize this. So if there's certain types, for example, we see opportunity here in the middle. If you never use opportunities, you can personalize this and simply take it off. If there's something that you want on here, like a purchase order that's not there, again, you can just add it on. It's very easy. But you can simply navigate to the record that you want, click on that, and kind of away you go. So the next thing that we see moving over is this global search bar, this bar up here. There's a lot of different searches you can do within NetSuite, but this one, which will almost always be at the top of your page, is always referred to as the global search bar, because when you're searching in here, it's going to be searching through your entire NetSuite account, always looking through all of those records for whatever you're inputting. And there's a lot of tips and tricks related to this. I do cover that in other videos, but I'll just give you a couple pointers here. So if you do a search, a lot of times, especially because you're searching your entire NetSuite account, you might have a ton of records. So you might want to limit it right out the get-go to whatever specifically you're looking for. So let's say you want to take a look for customers. So instead of just typing in a customer, let's take a look at adding a specific prefix to be able to limit it down in terms of what you're looking for. So if we're looking for customer, we can actually add CUS, right? The beginnings of the word customer. And if we put a colon, now anything that we type after that colon is going to be limited to just within customer records. So if we type John, we come up with this Jones Manufacturing. So the JON appears in that Jones, and it's going to pull it up. And again, it's not going to search JON anywhere. It's going to specifically look within customers. Now, if you want to limit it by another prefix, let's say employees, all you'd have to do is type EMP or EMPL, just some amount of, it doesn't have to be 3, but some amount of the first few letters of whatever you're trying to search that will make it different. For example, you can have items and inventory. Those both start with I. So if you're looking for inventory, you might want to put INV colon and then search whatever you're looking for. For items, you might want to put IT colon and then whatever you're looking for. Any kind of thing that you put in there, you're simply limiting it by that. Another tip I want to give you is if we do, there's a thing called a wildcard. It's basically a percent symbol. So if we add that, what the wildcard is doing is anything that it's put into, it's allowing any amount of characters of any type to be dictated. So for example, we searched JON before and they came up with one entry. So if we do J wildcard N, we're now specifying that between the letters J and N for a customer record, any amount of characters can go in between them. So now instead of just coming up with one Jones customer, now we get Jennings, John, Jansen, JBL. So for example, the JBL, that's a good one because if we look at that, you can see the J is over here and then a completely different word, the ink, the N in the ink is being taken as the N. So all of these letters and spaces in between the J and the N, any that applies to that suddenly come up. So that's great. If you're not totally sure, you don't remember the exact spelling of something, or you knew that it had Alistair in the name of the company, but you don't remember what the first name was, or maybe you have two names, but there might be words in between there. You can simply put the wildcard in the middle or at the beginning if you don't know how the thing starts, and it will give you all the different options. So it's a nice way to kind of take what you know and find exactly the record that you're looking for. So those are just some tips and tricks related to the global search bar. Next up, we have over here, we have the home button. So what this is going to do is no matter where you are in NetSuite, if you click this, it's going to return you to this home dashboard. And that's great just in general because as you go deep into records, it can be a little disorienting as to where you are. If you ever kind of lose track of where you are, you can always go back to the home dashboard just to kind of start off at square zero. Second thing you have as an option is if you go down here, you have set preferences. So if you click on that, basically what you're going to do is just for your role, this isn't going to affect anyone else in NetSuite. It's also not necessarily going to affect other roles you may have. Just the role that you're currently in, it will allow you to set some basic preferences for your NetSuite account. So that could be things like the formatting for words or for dates and numbers. You can also do things like change the coloring scheme. So if you don't want it to be blue, but you want it to be red, you can change that. And a number of different other options, how big lists are when they pop up. There's a number of different things you can set and they're categorized by type. So you can always take a look at that. and make those preferences based on your needs. Again, I have a video that gives recommendations on certain preferences. The last two little icons we're going to touch on here, this star is the shortcuts. That's similar to a browser's favorites. You're basically, for some record or list or page, if you set it as a shortcut, you can simply go to that listing, if I'll hover over it, and it'll give you all the shortcuts that you have. So you can just immediately go back to that page as opposed to trying to navigate back to that page. It's just a quick way to pull that up. And lastly, we have the recent records button over here. That's very helpful. Again, that's similar to like a history for a web browser. If you were just on a customer and now you've gone off and done something and you want to go back to that customer, instead of having to navigate through, you can simply go, oh, good, this is the Jack Doe customer I want to go back to. You click on it and it immediately takes you there. So those are the basics of the home dashboard, and everything, that dark blue bar, right? The classic, or in this case, the classic center, but just whatever center you have, that bar and everything above that, for 99% of locations or records you can be on in NetSuite, that will all remain the same. Everything below that will change based on the record that you're on. So for example, let's actually create a new record. In this case, let's do a sales order. So we're now on a new sales order, a blank sales order that we can create. And I'm not going to specifically talk about sales orders, but I'm actually going to show you all of these records. They often have certain patterns to them. So I'm going to explain basically how to navigate these records and how to view them correctly. So you'll see at the top here, we have the name of the record. So in this case, a sales order. It could be a customer, an invoice, any different type of record. Whatever you clicked on, it will be visible there. And if it has an icon, it will be shown there. So this is what all sales orders will show as their icon. So it's immediately visually recognized. And then everything you see below it, from the name at the top all the way down to this dark blue bar here, is referred to as the main or the header section of that record. So basically all the key information or the key fields, right? Every single one of these places that you can input data, that's called a field in NetSuite. And all of those that are key to that record are going to be in that top section, that main or header section. So you can go through, we have these field groups, kind of subheaders really, that you can categorize things, but you don't actually need those. Many records won't have them at all, and you can just customize that as needed. So once we get down here, we have this dark blue bar here. That's referred to as the sub tab bar. So it's sub, right? It's underneath and it's got all these tabs on it. So these options that you have here, right? You can click on any one of these, and when you do so, you'll see that has a bunch of different options underneath it. And you can actually click over here, and by doing that, it will actually reformat it where every single one of these tabs will suddenly kind of accordion out so that they're all visible at once. You can see here you have items and then promotions, etc. And most people don't prefer to have this view, but it is an option if that's something that you prefer. If not, you can go to collapse all, and then you'll see this icon basically on the side here. And if you click on that, again, it asks you, are you sure you want to kind of refresh this record, and going back to the option of having the sub tab bar just be normal. So I'm not going to dive into every single one of these options, but it's key to understand, again, important information at the top, and then not necessarily unimportant information, but then when you're getting into more specific things that are not just generic to that record, they'll start being placed within their relevant sub tab. Another important point is that underneath the sub tab bar, for example, you don't see it necessarily here, but let's go to communication. So now that we're in here, notice it's got this additional bar with all of these options. These are additional tabs. This entire option here, right? All of these things are called sub lists. So even though they're not necessarily lists, they're simply any time where you have the sub tab and you click on the sub tab and it takes you to a additional set of options, additional tabs, those are referred to as the sub list for that sub tab. So that's just the general terminology, so you can get familiar with that. And generally the most important or most frequently interacted with subtabs are going to be on the far left. So if you were filling out this sales order, you would fill out these fields. The ones that have asterisks are mandatory, meaning you have to fill them out to be able to save this sales order at all. And you simply fill out good customer, the date automatically fills in. You would set status, what's that set at? A lot of these notice they're not mandatory. You'd have to fill them in based on your company's needs. And then things like the item. So for a sales order, what is the item that's being purchased in the first place? You'd obviously have to set that. From there, you might set something in shipping, promotion if it's needed. In some cases, you won't need that at all. And then you would be able to come to the bottom here and hit save and record that sales order. So the process does not have to take that long. One additional thing I want to point out is the form. So the form can be important because if you're trying to create a sales order or really any time of record, the form is basically the layer between you and that record type. And it's going to dictate what fields you have available, what things you have to input, etc. So you might only ever deal with one form, but your company could have 10 different types of sales orders. And depending on the type of sales order you're doing, there might be a specific form that you need to grab or select here. Like we got a drop down, we've got a number of forms here. You'd want to make sure that you're on the correct form because it's going to have the fields set up in a certain way so that it's appropriate for whatever that task is. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand the concept of process flows and how that relates to your company. So I'll give you an example of a process flow. If a customer comes to your company, generates a sales order, right? They want some product from your company. The product is then maybe picked, packed, set up, and then shipped to the customer. So there's a fulfillment of that order, and then an invoice is sent to that customer, and the customer pays for it. Those 4 steps: sales order generated, the item is fulfilled, an invoice is sent to the customer, and then the customer pays. Those 4 together are what are called as a process flow, and that specific one is referred to as the order to cash process flow. You'll probably hear that term quite a bit. There are other process flows. For example, if your company is trying to procure raw materials or inventory, that process flow is referred to as procure to pay. If you're dealing with the accounting side of things, that process flow is referred to as record to report. So there's a number of different process flows. They all have somewhat catchy names. The basic concept is there's simply this series of steps that involve all these interactions and records so that your company can accomplish something within NetSuite or really just as a business. So the sales order is the first step of the order to cash process flow. And I'm not actually going to fill in this sales order, but just to give you a concept of it, if I put in the mandatory fields for this particular record and I hit the save button, it would take us to the next record. So it would create the sales order. It would then take you to a creation of a new record for an item fulfillment. You would then fill out just a few fields of information for that item fulfillment. You'd hit save on that. That then saves that record and creates another record for the invoice. You would fill in that information again to another record for the payment, recording what that payment was from the customer to your company for that original item. So in NetSuite, every time you're filling in this information and hitting save, it's going to be taking you to the next step along the line within this process flow. So it can be quite handy in that regard. And as you get more familiar with it, I know it seems like a lot of fields at first, but as you start dealing with these things, it gets more and more familiar to the point where you can fill it in literally a matter of seconds, depending on the complexity of that sales order, and simply take it along the line. So those are the basics of that. The next thing I want to show you are reports in NetSuite. So first, let's actually just go back to the home dashboard. So I'm going to leave this record. I'm not going to save what I input here. And we're now back at square zero. So if we want to take a look at reports, we go over here to the Classic Center and we see this reports dropdown. Now we have all these different options, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm scroll down here and everything from financial down to the bottom, there's a couple more underneath this one. Everything in that range, those are all actually reports, pre-made reports that come with your NetSuite. And really these are categories of reports. So the most commonly used category is of course financial. And within financial, again, you'll see all these options here. You'll recognize a lot of these, right? Especially accountants, income statements, balance sheets, comparative balance sheets, cash flow statements, the general ledger, chart of accounts, etc. All of these key financial statements and records you're going to be able to find here. So let's click on one of these just to give a concept of how these things look in NetSuite. Let's check out the income statement. All right, so we come to this income statement, and again, for accountants, this is going to be very familiar. If you're not familiar with accounting, that's fine. I can actually make this simpler. You're gonna see all this information here. Now, if you want to actually condense it down to be just a few fields, there's actually a tool over here. We're gonna go to the collapse feature. So if I click on that, it actually takes that whole income statement, like almost like an accordion, and it brings it down to simply the income and expenses and the net income. So it takes it down to those two. Now, if I want to start expanding it, I have this option down here. So if I click on that, it's going to start accordioning it out one by one. Every level is going to start appearing, and to the point where everything's fully out. And you'll see we've got income, things like sales. We're going to have cost of sales, various expenses, and every single thing on here. Notice it goes from an arrow to a hand. You can actually click on every single field here, whether it's an amount or a category, and it will take you to another similar looking report that really shows you everything related to that thing. So if I want to know what is this total cost of, the total cost of sales, if I click on that, it will bring me to another report that shows me all of the numbers that compose that cost of sales in this case. So it'll show me all the values that lead up to that, as well as the individual items that are making up that value. So they're very dynamic, the reports. You can interact with them. You also have all these filters in this blue section at the bottom. You can set it for the time period. That's obviously very key for accounting. You can set from this time to that time. You have kind of quick searches on the left here and then specific times on the right. You can also set the context within subsidiaries. So if your company, for example, has 10 different subsidiaries and you're at headquarters, maybe you want to look at the accounting, the income statement for one particular subsidiary. So you can specify that and narrow it down by subsidiary. And then of course, this is a column specific filter. Let's take a look. It's kind of best to just show you to show what that means. So let's say accounting quarter. So that means we're going to look at the income statement by accounting quarter. And if I hit refresh down here, suddenly we get the same income statement, but now we have quarter 1, 2, 3, 4 all broken out. We can do it by month. We can do it by department. However we want to kind of slice and dice this financial report is that option down here by column, because now it's adding columns by whatever we're filtering it. So that's a very handy way to take a look at these basic financial reports in NetSuite. And again, there's dozens of other common reports. You can look at sales by sales representative, etc. Many different reports. You also have a bunch of export features down here. You can make it as an Excel document, as a PDF file. You can also email it out to others. For example, if you want to send sales information to some of the executives in your company, you have all of those different options down here at the bottom. Next, I want to show you, again, I'm going to go back to the home dashboard, not because I can't get there from the record I was just on. You know, we still have that bar, that center at the top here. But again, I just want to kind of take you back to the home dashboard to just give you that familiarity, and we'll venture out from the home dashboard. So I showed you reports. The next reporting tool for NetSuite up from reports is, they're called saved searches. And the context is reports are kind of off the shelf. They're pre-made. They're very easy to work with. They have limited customization that you can apply to them, but they're very handy for just kind of out of the box, understandable, especially financial records, things like that. The reports are handy tools. Save searches, far more customizable. They're more involved. They definitely take more understanding to be able to use them. And they're very robust. They give you a lot of different options. So let's take a look at a saved search. So first we want to start one. So we're going to go to new search. And if we click on that, it's going to say, out of all of these different types of searches, what's the basic category that you want to look in? So the most common type of saved search is a transactional search, right? Like maybe you're looking for sales orders or invoices. So we're going to go down to transaction. And we're going to click on that type. So now we're already kind of customizing this as a transaction-based search. Now, so far it's just a search because we're going to set what the parameters are. And then once we create that, it's now going to become a saved search, which makes it accessible in the future or accessible to other users. So as soon as the search is kind of completed, you'll have the saved aspect for future use. So we have these two tabs here. These are the most important tabs related to saved searches. As we get to the next step, you'll see there's going to be a lot of other tabs here to really customize these things. But criteria and results are hands down the most important part, because criteria is setting basically what is supposed to come up in this saved search. What are the options that you want for this? And then the results are going to say, now that you've kind of filtered it down to, let's say, these 10 different, let's say, customers, from these 10 customers, what's the information that you want to provide? Do you want to know how much they've ever purchased? Maybe what was their last sales order? How long have they been a customer? Anything related information-wise, you can set that as a result. Okay, so because we're in criteria, let's set the first item as amount. And as soon as we click on that, it's going to say, okay, well, what are we talking about with amounts? So instead of any, let's say we want anything greater than $500. So we're going to specify that amount and we're going to hit set. So now we've specified that we're looking for transactions that are greater than $500. And we can set a bunch of other things. We're going to leave it at that point. There's one other setting actually I'm going to do, mainline. This is really just setting kind of the way in which it's going to search for the records. So that's a common one, mainline. Again, in the specific videos on safe searches, I really go into detail in terms of what these things mean. But now that we've set the criteria, we're looking for transactions that are greater than $500. We're going to go to results. And notice in results, it actually, because it's a transaction search, it already gives us all these things that it's expecting that we probably want to know. So things like the date, the order type, the name, who's the customer that are making these over $500 purchases, a lot of other things. If we want to basically clear it, we could hit remove all up here and we could clear these all out and just specify, no, we just want to know these three exact maybe columns of information. But for this, we're just going to go with what we have here. So that's all fine. We're going to now hit submit. And now we get this search. It's generated every single instance in which we had an order. I'm going to move my little box here and you can see these amounts here. So everything over $500, and it's going to give us all this other information related to this. So far we've successfully accomplished a search in NetSuite. Now we want to make it a saved search. So we're going to hit this save this search button. It's basically going to bring us back to the search, but now it's going to give us a ton more options. So notice criteria and results. Now we've got all of these other options, and we're going to specifically say transactions over 500. So we're going to name this save search. And there's other fields we can put in here, but we're going to keep it very simple now. We're just going to say, okay, we like what we have. We don't want to add further customization. We're just going to hit saved. And now we have a save search for this transaction. So that's a simple example. You can get very complex with them. Again, in the videos, I go really into depth of how you would set those up and some of the additional features, but that's just a really simple Simon version of that. So again, going back to the home dashboard, those are a lot of the basics that you're going to be interacting with, at least in the beginning, for NetSuite. One additional thing before I jump off of this to explain is the concept of help within NetSuite. So if you're dealing with NetSuite and you need more information, obviously this channel, the entire purpose of this is I'm trying to give you information and really help you along to understand some of these features and really how to use NetSuite. But keep in mind that NetSuite does come with certain options. The most important to describe is it's called SuiteAnswers, and it's actually a different page that's a repository for articles basically covering NetSuite and how to debug things in NetSuite. So to go to those, we're actually going to hover over here, these three dots here. You might actually have the support tab within there, but if it's too condensed on your page, it'll basically add dots at the side and it'll throw anything over there. So support is the last tab we have, so we can see it here. And if we hover over that, we see this go to SuiteAnswers. So we're going to click on that and notice it's not actually going to take us off of this page, meaning we're not going to leave NetSuite per se. NetSuite's still going to stay open on this tab, and then it's going to open an entirely new tab, bringing us to the SuiteAnswers website. We have this search bar. We can simply, it says ask what is my account ID. So if we do that, what is my account ID? And we do a search on that or anything that you have a question on, it pulls up, notice 23,000 results, all different types. It shows you the types of results. Some are general, some are how-to articles, and you'll see the actual results over here. You can click on this. This is a help topic specifically showing you how to find your account ID in NetSuite. So you always have the ability to simply search something here in SuiteAnswers and get the information you need to know. All right. And that's it for the basics of NetSuite. If you found this video at all helpful, please hit the like button. It makes this video more accessible to others to get this information. And if there's something specific in NetSuite that you want help on, please let me know in the comments below. I will make videos based on requests. And also, I come out with a new video every week. So if you subscribe to this channel, you can gain access to all the videos we're going to come out with. Lastly, I do want to make another mention of the fact that in the link below, we do have the Super Training website, which has a Basics of NetSuite course. That's almost 50 videos. The course is entirely free. And then we do have additional paid courses. We have an administrator's course. We have ones for consultants, accounting, etc. So those are all accessible to you. Just check out the link below. And lastly, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I see you again in the next video.